What's up everyone, it's King Moosh here with JCross X to welcome you all back for episode 13 of Class Overview. For those who aren't familiar, the Class Overview series is a collection of informative videos where we're going to be discussing the different classes in Fire Emblem Three Houses.
We'll be going over general information about each class, like their certification requirements, stats, abilities, and their overall strengths and limitations to determine their viability and what units are a good fit for each class. As per usual, these videos will be gameplay focused, so there shouldn't really be any major spoilers, but I advise you anyways to watch at your own discretion, and if you haven't played Three Houses yet, you absolutely should.
This episode is about the Mercenary class. It's a very bare-bones infantry class with a standard 5 movement and no class abilities. Like the other physical intermediate classes, this class does not allow access to a unit spell list, but it does allow access to brawling. In order to guarantee certification in a Mercenary, you will need at least a C rank in swords, but you could gamble it at a D+ if you want to. It's important to note that this class shares the exact same certification requirements as Thief, so if you're planning on certifying into one of them, as long as you have enough intermediate seals, you should be able to certify into both. Mercenary grants a +2 skill bonus to swords and also a +1 to axes. These aren't particularly useful, but they do provide a simple path toward hero as a potential advanced class promotion, and more importantly, the increased axe XP can also be helpful for certifying into warrior, which most units who certify for Mercenary will likely want to do eventually.
On the statistical side of things, Mercenary's base stats are not really noteworthy and are actually identical to Lord, but with one less res point. If you get unlucky with level ups and depending on what unit you certify into this class, you may get a small increase in HP, strength, or defense. Most likely, if you receive any points, it will be in the form of a point or two of dex or speed, which are decent, sitting at a 10 base for both. The stat boosts, on the other hand, are actually pretty solid, with a +1 in HP, speed, and notably a +1 in strength. In comparison to other intermediate classes, these stack up pretty well. The growth rate modifiers are not too shabby either, with a +20% boost in HP and a 5% boost all in strength, speed, and charm. The class also has a -5 growth penalty to res, but this is hardly noteworthy and won't be mentioned again. The boost and growth rate modifiers show that this class is pretty balanced, offering both a bit of extra speed and strength. Overall, this makes it a pretty decent class statistically. The growth rates and stat boosts are serviceable enough for around the time you will be able to certify for it, and definitely don't limit your unit. Its stats aren't the make or break and certainly don't hurt, but they don't stand out in any exceeding way either though.
Upon mastering Mercenary, you will unlock the equipable ability Vantage, a very powerful ability that requires setup. Vantage activates when a unit has less than or equal to 50% of their max HP, meaning you will either have to survive an attack from an enemy, or inflict self-damage by using something like a Devil Axe or one of the hero's relics on a unit that lacks a crest. Once Vantage is active, when an enemy initiates combat with you, you will attack before the enemy. This is obviously a very powerful effect and was one of the strongest survivability tools for enemy phase units. However, this isn't all that strong on its own, and it arguably may not even be worth a slot in most builds. It becomes a lot more powerful by combining it with other abilities that also require your unit to be missing HP, so the setup time is more worth it. Some examples are the ability Desperation, the Defiant abilities which activate specifically at the 25% threshold rather than 50%, the Combat Art Vengeance, and personal abilities like Balthus' King of Grappling or Bernadetta's Persecution Complex. The best synergy by far is of course the iconic combination of Vantage and Wrath, which when paired together it allows your enemy phase units to one-shot enemies with crits before they even get a chance to attack. Mastering Mercenary is not the only way to access the Vantage effect, but it is the most consistent way.
As for strengths, there isn't too much to talk about honestly. Like I said, its stats are decent, especially its boost, but they are nothing exceedingly noteworthy. The most obvious strength is its mastery. Due to this, you can definitely get away with mastering Mercenary much later before you properly get your unit set up with the Wrath from the advanced class Warrior, or any of the Defiant skills. Anyone who would even consider mastering this early most likely either has a good personal that stacks with Vantage, or is a Vengeance user who will be generally at lower HP. It cannot be understated how good Wrath is in conjunction with Vantage though, as it can allow for some insanely fast map clears if executed properly. This combination becomes even stronger with an item such as the Chalice of Beginnings, or Gambits like Retribution, both of which enable the counterattack from any range. If you properly build a character around this combo, you can get so much value out of them. Some prefer the dodge tank builds, but those are generally hard to set up and only popular in flyers who have access to Alert Stance Plus and or Avoid plus 10 or 20. Vantage Wrath takes a bit of time to master the classes for, but it can definitely be worth it in the long run, especially since getting below 50% HP isn't too difficult with things such as non-crest users using a relic, devil weapons, or just intentionally taking damage from 1 to 2 units. This is only the remarkable thing I have to say about this class, as being a decent intermediate sword class isn't really that impressive.
There are unfortunately a few major weaknesses to discuss when it comes to Mercenary. Statistically, it's not the worst at all, but there's nothing particularly good or unique about statistical benefits that would be a selling point for this class. The certification requirement honestly isn't great either, as most units don't have any reason to raise swords early on unless they really need to fix their speed by certifying it a thief. Most importantly, this class suffers from not having even a single class ability. This means as far as combat performance goes, it's even worse than a class like Lord, which just makes it a pain to get XP and master it. When physical units have access to classes like Archer, Cavalier, and Pegasus Knight at this point in the game, it just means that Mercenary stands out even more for its subpar performance. Collectively, these weaknesses all contribute to Mercenary lacking any sort of unique identity aside from being the class that gives you Vantage. As great as Vantage is, Vantage Wrath is a pretty generic build path that isn't necessarily the most optimal option for many units, especially in a player phase focused game like Three Houses. And as mentioned before, there are other ways to access Vantage as well as alternatives to it like dodge tanking and prot tanking, so it can only carry the class so far.
With all that being said, I'd have to give Mercenary a pretty average rating of 5.5 out of 10. The class isn't really hurt too much by its stats, but as we have said, it's painfully subpar combat-wise, and the stats, while not limiting you, don't justify time spent in the class at such a pivotal time in the game where other masteries from other intermediate classes provide more immediate value once unlocked. Vantage is definitely really good, but the fact that its effect is not completely exclusive to the class definitely doesn't help its case. What also doesn't help its case is that it's a sword class, which we believe is the weakest weapon type in Three Houses. Even those who swear by the sword would most likely opt to certify for Thief instead, as the speed growth for that class is higher at 10%, while also having a higher base dex and speed. Generally speaking, speed is one of the most important stats for a sword user, so I don't know why you would use Mercenary over Thief when considering just combat capabilities. If Mercenary did not have access to Vantage, it would probably just be worse Lord, but as it stands, that is the one saving grace of the class. As for unit recommendations, there aren't too many I'd recommend certifying into early, but Balthus is definitely our standout pick. His personal is really good and works wonderfully with Vantage, while being a strong statistical unit that lacks tools in the player phase. This means he can definitely be a prime enemy phase unit later when he acquires the certification and eventual mastery of both Warrior and Mercenary. Having a boon in both weapon types needed to certify for this class, being Sword and Axe, also makes this much easier for Balthus, so I have to give him our number one pick this time around. Claude and Byleth also fall into a similar category of being really strong statistically while lacking access to broken combat art to build around. This can apply to many other units who would rather enemy phase because of this reason, such as Caspar, Raphael, or Ashe. Albeit not as statistically good as the first three mentioned, you can sort of default them into your Wrath Vantage user, as that is probably one of the most optimal builds for them. Lastly, as Josh mentioned earlier, Persecution Complex from Bernadetta can work, and she does have access to Vantage, albeit she is definitely not the best user of Wrath Vantage and can be more useful as a player phase compared to the other units that we mentioned prior.
Mercenary is an overall very poor performance class that has a pretty great mastery, which averages out to a C tier placement. I can't say it's a bad class because many units will want to go Mercenary to pick up Vantage, but it's definitely not a class you want to spend a lot of time in if you can avoid it. This is a class you should probably consider waiting to master until you've picked up the Knowledge Gem, since having your good units spend a lot of time in this class isn't going to do you any favors in missions. That's about all we have to say about the Mercenary class. If you liked the video or have any thoughts of your own, please leave a like and make sure to comment.
I also recommend checking the description if you're not already subscribed to both of our channels.
Stay tuned for episode 14 on JCross's channel, where we'll be moving on to the next intermediate class, Thief.